Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and you're watching another review video here on the channel, one that hopefully you have been expecting if you've been watching for a while. Today we are talking about the A Chorus of Dragons series. I haven't scripted this, I haven't really planned at all, and my window's open and there are some very noisy birds outside, so if you can hear those, I do apologise. I finally finished this series very recently. I finished it a couple of weeks ago when you're watching this, I think, depending on how long it takes me to edit, and I wanted to have a little chat about it because I do have a video that looks a bit like this up on the channel for the first 3 books, and I thought it was about time that I did an updated version now that we have all 5 out, because how often do we get to talk about completed book series? Not that often. Certainly I don't. Maybe that's a me problem. Anyway, quick disclaimers before we start. I was sent every single one of these for free for review. I did buy my copy of The Ruin of Kings because I wanted all matching hardbacks. All the others were sent to me for review, and I had a paperback copy of Ruin of Kings originally. Regardless of where books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books, and all opinions are my own. I'm also going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as I can while still talking about why you should read the later books in the series. I'm not going to bring any major spoilers in, and even if I did, to be honest, they probably wouldn't make that much sense without context. But if you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, click away now. Or if you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing about books 4 and 5, you can go watch my previous video. This is a big epic fantasy series that's published by Tor. The first book came out in, let me check, 2019, which doesn't feel that long ago for a 5-book series, actually, but I suppose, yeah, 2019 was another time, another world. It's done reasonably well. The people I know who've read this have really, really loved it in general. I don't think I know anyone who really didn't get on with this that I was about to say that I would consider a friend, but that makes it sound like I hate everyone who doesn't like this book. I haven't encountered anyone who didn't like it, but I'm sure there are people who didn't. But I don't think it's as well known as it could be, and I think part of that is to do with some of the book's structure elements, and some of it's to do with, well, the whims of a fantasy audience. Anyway, let me go through each of the books for you. First up, we have The Ruin of Kings. It looks a bit like this. Do I want to talk about, like, the ins and outs of each one? I don't think I do. Let me just give you the rundown of the books in order. Although they do have, conveniently, I don't think it's going to show you it in focus. There we go. It has the which book it is on the spine, which is very helpful. So, Ruin of Kings is book 1, The Name of All Things is book 2, The Memory of Souls is book 3, The House of Always is book 4, and it concludes with The Discord of Gods, which is book 5. I don't think I would have picked up The Ruin of Kings if it weren't for the fact that I was sent a review copy for multiple reasons. This just wasn't what I was really looking for at the time, and this kind of big fantasy is something that, I don't know, I think I tend to gravitate away from, because quite often it can be quite long-winded and not particularly diverse and not particularly interesting, whereas this series really surprised me. So if this cover isn't giving what you think it needs to give, trust me, the book will give that. And one place I really recommend looking if you want to get a full sense of like the tropes of these books and some content warnings is Jenn Lyons' website, which is absolutely fantastic. It includes, at least for the first 3, it probably does for the first 5, AO3 tags for all of the books, which is really, really helpful. But yes, we have this kind of sprawling epic fantasy, which has effectively 2 backstory books, the backstory of one of our main characters and the backstory of another, and then 3 books of, right, let's solve this issue then, which I really like as a structure. It makes perfect sense to me, and it really sets up why the characters are doing what they're doing, why they make the choices that they make, and how they interact with each other. I really, really like it. I was trying to think about which stage of the story is my favourite, and it's really tricky to do, because aside from the first 2 books and that backstory element, the narrative is very cohesive. They're set in very different places. The actual narrative structure is very different. But that being said, the actual story flows between them really well, and we, for the most part, follow the same characters throughout. It's it's quite a large cast of characters, all of whom I love, but it's not bringing in brand new characters all the time. Sometimes you get a perspective you haven't had before, but you're going to know that character reasonably well. So with that in mind, it's quite hard to pin down, this was the book that I really, really enjoyed the most. I think if you had to make me decide, it's probably tied between The Memory of Souls and The House of Always, and I like them for different reasons. The Memory of Souls has a lot of really good narrative payoff, I think because it works as kind of the drawing together of the first 2 books, and House of Always I really enjoy for the structure of it and the way that the story plays out and the various plot threads that get picked up in this one. I really like how this one bounces back between settings, which is always fun. That being said, I really did enjoy how this series ended up, and it's partly why I'm making this video, because it's so nice to be able to say, yes, from start to finish, this is a great series. Discord of Gods, in some ways, is kind of different from the other books in the narrative structure sense. I will come on to what I mean by that in a second, but for the most part, I think it's a really great continuation of the story, and it wraps things up really nicely in the way that you want a 5-book series to end, which I won't go into because it might spoil it for people and I don't want people to be cross with me. So what do I mean by narrative structure? All 5 books are written as kind of chronicles of the events in those books. So you have the actual text and you also have footnotes from commentators who are people that you get to know in the story, shall we say. And I find that really, really enjoyable. I really like hearing their perspective on things. It can add a note of humour to the books that wouldn't be there otherwise. And also it adds for that element of dramatic irony where you know more than the characters know, or you find out things that the characters didn't know at that time and that kind of thing. I really enjoy that. I find footnotes a little bit difficult to read physically because I find often you have to take yourself out of the flow of the narrative, and if you read the way that I read, where you're semi-skimming the page and then going back and darting around a bit, I don't know, my brain's wired weird, then it can make it quite difficult. However, if you are doing them via audiobook, which is what I did for this reread, it's very easy because they're put into the text and it just all flows through and the narrators change, which is very helpful. So we have that element, but also within the majority of the books there is also shifting around of perspective and often time. So you'll have a character telling the story of an event in their life, and then it will bounce back to the place in which they are telling that story, and they are talking to another person about the story that they just told, and then they will go forward potentially with someone else's part of the story. And that's probably not making a huge amount of sense, maybe, but basically there's a lot of different narrative threads to keep hold of. I don't think it's too difficult. I think 3 years ago or so I would have said, oh, this is a really tricky thing to wrap your head around. If you're used to multiple POV, I don't think it will be. It's just something you have to kind of keep track of for yourself where you are in time, because also a lot of the events of certainly books 3, 4 and 5 happen quite close together, so it can be helpful to keep a vague eye on where you are in time. That's probably one of my biggest selling points of the series though, is that narrative structure. I think it works really well, it makes for really interesting reading, and it makes it feel very different to a lot of other stuff that I've read. These are also incredibly inclusive books in terms of queer identities. I really enjoy the way that the book sets up quite a prejudiced society in one aspect, or one of the societies that are explored in this world, and then kind of systematically tears all of that down and makes that like, this was silly that this was patriarchal, it was rubbish and it made everything bad for them. I like that part. But also there's a lot of bisexual representation, which I'm always here for, some trans representation, heaps of stuff. Again, check those AO3 tags if there's anything particular you're looking for, but I found it just a really refreshing epic fantasy with all of those things included, and not in a way where it was selling the whole series on that fact. It's a good epic fantasy, and also it has these elements to it, which is what I want all the time, please and thank you. I fell head over heels for all of these characters, regardless of their identities. I think they are fantastic. Even the villainous characters, or even the, morally grey characters, I just found so interesting. I really liked reading the various different perspectives. I loved getting to know these characters across 5 books. It's just really enjoyable. And again, I think the audiobook helps with that because there are those different narrators, so it's nice and easy to differentiate characters. This is definitely a character-driven series. I would describe it as that. I don't know if everyone would. For me, it's the characters that really made me love it, so I think I would describe it that way. It's one of those series where you'll meet a character in book 1 and you'll kind of be like, okay, great. And then by the end of book 5, you're like, oh no, never touch my poor disaster child. Don't do anything to them. And things happen to them. There are also dragons. I know it's in the name, but I feel the need to mention that there are dragons, and they are actually dragons, and they are really, really cool. I won't spoil any of those elements for you, but the dragons are really cool. There's some really interesting world-building ideas in this book, and you can tell that Jenn Lyons comes from, I think it's a video game background. Yeah, art director and video game producer. So you can tell that kind of almost quest collecty, achievement unlocked kind of mindset that's coming into this, which is really, really interesting, and it makes for really good storytelling and also fascinating world building. This is a world where you could write hundreds of stories, I'm sure, and if Jenn Lyons was interested, I would like that. If you could write me some short stories, please and thank you. Just some deleted scenes, maybe? I'll take anything at this point. I mentioned audiobooks. It's interesting. Originally, when I read up to the first 4, I did them all purely physically, and I had to really knuckle my head down, particularly for book 1, because as you will know if you've been watching the channel for a while, I'm very bad with books that contain a lot of names, and particularly family names. I find that very difficult. I don't know why I didn't think of it before. Audiobook. I'm much better hearing that in my ears. So yes, under Angela's suggestion, I did the audiobooks for almost all of these. I did it for all but the last maybe 200 pages of Discord of Gods, which I don't know why it was. I just got to the end and I really wanted to have a book physically and read it, and I think possibly I was just ready to be at the end, and I know I can read a bit faster than audiobooks speak. But I would 100% recommend the audiobooks if you're a person who likes big chunky epic fantasy audiobooks. They have different narrators, I've mentioned that multiple times. They are really, really well done. There are a few bits, and I don't know if there's a way of reporting this, but just where they'll repeat a section, or they'll do the footnotes twice, or that kind of thing, which is just a little bit of an editing error. But it doesn't confuse you at all. It's just, you notice, oh, I've heard that before, hang on a second. But I would absolutely recommend them. They are fantastic, and they're a really good way of getting through these quite larger books, especially if you're like me and holding something for a very long time like this is not your favourite thing to do. Is there anything else I want to say about these that I haven't already said somewhere else? Obviously, I haven't read a huge amount of traditional epic fantasy, kind of the classics stuff. I've read quite a bit of it, but not as much as other friends I have read. So I don't know if I'm the best person to speak to this, but for me, at least, I think there's something really nice about how familiar these books are in the sense of the some of the heroic elements, some of the story tropes that are in there, but also the general sense of this is a big epic fantasy, we've got prophecies, we've got people who didn't know they were going to save the world trying to save the world, and that kind of thing. But it's simultaneously very modern in its way of looking at the world and the kind of themes and issues it explores within that within that story. And I really appreciate that. I think I mentioned that in my original video, that I like that this is an epic fantasy for people who love epic fantasy, and also for people who want the kind of newer stuff that fantasy authors are putting out. I think that's to be applauded. It's really great. Essentially, Jenn Lyons can write anything. I'll read it at this point. I'm really excited for whatever she's doing next. And I would absolutely, if you haven't already picked up this series, if this is the first time you're hearing about it, welcome, hello. I absolutely think it is well worth picking these up. They are just so much fun, and at the end of the day, you get so many pages worth of content, and I hope that you fall in love with these characters and you have a wonderful time. Can I think of anything specific that I think I could compare these to? The issue is I really can't. I think possibly there's an element of N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy in there, in the sense of some of that interesting narrative structure, and also some of the sort of dealing with a world that's already broken. There's elements of that to this, because there's a lot of history and trauma and things that have been raked up from hundreds of years ago in this series that's also in that. So that would be something I would recommend as well. I don't think they are hugely similar in tone, because Broken Earth is much more, I don't want to say depressing, but kind of depressing, whereas there's a lot more humour in Chorus of Dragons. Maybe, but I do think there are some similar elements. So that's the thing, this is such a... It's not a totally unique series, but there's nothing I've read that's made me have exactly the same feelings. In terms of my love of the characters and seeing them over this much wider narrative, maybe Robin Hobb, but again, that's because that's the only big multi-series fantasy that I've really read. I do have a video up that is recommendations for book series longer than 3 books, so if you're interested in reading more longer, chunkier series, that is somewhere. I will endeavour to link that in a place. But yeah, if you have any recommendations, if you've read these and you can think of anything similar, please do let me know, because I would love to read more. I would love to, yes, please, thank you. And if you have read these and you didn't like them, or if you loved them, or if you have any kind of opinion really, do also let me know that down in the comments below. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because it makes me feel loved and appreciated, and it lets you know when I post new videos and reviews such as this one. You can also follow me on social media, come hang out on Discord where we have lovely chill chats about books, but nothing makes me feel more loved and appreciated than my patrons over on Patreon who make videos like this possible. Thank you so much. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Ooh, okay, no, I'm gonna drop those on me if I do that. These are also incredibly queer. I'm just patting the pile, but welcome so much. Welcome so much. No.